Hi everyone, my name is Sydney and I am the owner and designer of Treble Metals, and today I'm going to show you how to make a flat Selene peyote stitch bracelet. This is a pretty simple bracelet to make, but it's very elegant and it goes great with a lot of outfits. You can do it in any sort of color combination. You can switch up the number of beads you use and the way you add them to make it have different effects. So this is a great project to start out with. It's one of my favorite pieces to make. I've made more of these than I can count, and each one is great in its own unique way. If you're going to start this project and you haven't done a peyote stitch before, you should go ahead and figure out how to do that. There's plenty of great online tutorials showing you how to do an even count peyote stitch. It will help a lot to know that before you start this project, because basically every element of this project does use a peyote stitch. So if you know how to do that and you're ready to get out your materials, then we can get started.
Alright, so to start you'll need to gather your materials. So the great thing about this project is by changing the sizes of the beads or how many you use in each row, you can greatly vary how the final result will turn out. But for a basic project like this, we're going to use some size 15 rounds, some size 11 duplicas, some size 11 rounds, some size 8 rounds, and then we're going to finish off with 2mm cut crystal beads. Now you can also finish off with size 6 rounds if you want, but I like this extra sparkle that the crystal beads add to it. I also use wildfire thread, 0.006 inches, and I use about 2 feet of thread to start. Sometimes you'll need to add more, and in another video I can show you how to add thread onto a beading project. I also use these English beading needles. They're nice and firm, they're not going to bend, and so it makes it a lot easier to pick up the beads. And finally, I like using a beading mat just because I think it makes it a lot easier to both keep track of the beads and also to pick them up. And if you don't have a beading mat, you can actually use a piece of felt or other similarly fuzzy fabric. Alright, so we're going to get started. So this project is going to use a basic peyote stitch. So the first thing we're going to do is start the first row. So you're going to pick up 4 of the size 15 round beads, and you are going to pick those up and pull them to the end, and you're going to leave about 6 inches of thread at the end. So now we're going to pick up another size 15, and we're going to go back through not the last bead we added, but the second to last bead we added. So you're just going to go right back through that. So now what you should have is 2 beads at the bottom, both going into a single bead. So now you're going to do that again. You're going to pick up one size 15 bead, skip 1 bead, and go back through the next. So now all the beads should be held in place. They shouldn't be falling on the string, so you don't have to worry about tying off the end of your thread. So now you should have 6 beads attached, 1 and then 2 and then 1 and then 2. So now this is where we're going to start creating the pattern. So the first bead you're going to add now is not one of the size 15 black beads. You're going to add one of the size 11 silver beads. And you're going to pick that up. You're not going to go back through the bead you just went through. You're going to skip that one, and you're going to go through one of the beads that is now sticking out in the row of 2. And you're going to pull that all the way through. And then you're going to pick up one size 15 black bead. Again, skip 1 bead, go through the next one. So now all your rows should have 2 beads in them, and all of them should have 2 black beads except for the bottom row, which has 1 silver bead. All right, now we're going to continue. So once again, you're going to pick up a black bead, skip one, go through the next one. And now you're going to pick up another silver bead and go through the silver bead. So basically what we're doing here is we're creating a staggered pattern. So instead of doing just a straight row of all the same colored beads, we're kind of creating a diagonal line of them. So that's what you're going to keep in mind this whole time, is that you're just creating a diagonal line. So now we're going to start the next color. So now we've done our silvers. Now we're going to start on our size 11 black beads. So we're going to pick up one and go through that silver bead we just added. But now we have to continue that line of silver. So we're going to pick up another silver bead and go through that size 15 black bead that we added. All right. And then finally, you're going to turn around, add one last silver bead. And that is the end of the row of silver. You now have 4 silver beads that are all lined up in a row. And if you ever notice that your beads are starting to get a little loose, just pull a bit on, just tug a bit on the last bead you added, and that should tighten everything. All right, so now we're going to continue by adding another size 11 black bead. So you can see how we're starting to make a stripe pattern here. And now we're going to add another color. You can see there's a pattern here. We're going to add the size 8 clear silver lined beads. We're going to add one of those and go back through the size 11 black bead that we just added. Pull that through. All right. Now we're going to add another size 11 black bead, go through the Delica silver bead. Then we're going to turn around. I always like working from the bottom up, but you don't necessarily have to turn it around. We're going to add another black bead. Then we're going to go ahead and add another size 8 clear bead. All right, so now we've gotten to the point where we're going to add our last color and size of bead. We're gonna pick up one of these 2mm faceted red beads. Here we go. And these are also glass. They've just been cut to look like a gemstone. So we're gonna go back through that size 8 round. And now we have a little pop of color. But now we're going to continue to add the size 8 rounds just as we've been doing before. And you're just going to keep doing this pattern over and over, adding a new size row each time. Now, once you've added your largest size and it's time to add another size of bead, now we need to reverse the pattern because we have nowhere else to go. We've used all of our big beads. So now we're going to go back down to our next smallest size, our size 8 round beads. And we're going to add that on after the reds. And now we're going to start to decrease the pattern. And when you get to these bigger beads, you might have to tug on the thread a bit more because the size of them makes the thread a bit looser. So just make sure you're keeping your thread tight, although don't pull too hard because faceted crystals can sometimes accidentally cut your thread, and that would not be good. We're just going to add our last red crystal bead. Alright, now we have our widest row of crystal beads. And now we're going to go back to adding the size 8 beads. And now same thing, now we've added the size 8s, now we're going to go down to the size 11s. We're going to do a row of those. And we're going to just keep decreasing the pattern. And as you're decreasing again, you're going to want to make sure that your pattern's staying nice and tight. Now you might develop with the bigger beads creating basically a bubble because we're trying to weave beads together that are of different sizes, and so they're going to tend to bulge a bit in the middle, and that is okay. That's actually kind of the general effect we want, is a bit of a wave. So you can actually encourage those to do that by just pulling your smaller beads together, and that will cause those bigger beads to kind of create this wave effect. And finally, we are back down to the size 15 seed beads, the smallest ones. So for here, now that we've gotten down to the smallest ones, instead of only doing one row, we're actually going to do 3 rows because they're so small. And also this will just give a nice variation to the waving pattern. All right, so you now have for your top row, your top 2 rows, 3 rows of the size 15 black beads. So now you have completed a full wave of this pattern. You have 1 row of each size, and then you have 3 rows of the size 15s. So now it's time to grow it again. And now basically you're just going to keep repeating this pattern over and over again until you have the length of bracelet that you want. So now I'm just going to keep doing this over and over again. It usually requires 5 to 6 waves, but depending on the sizes of your beads and how many you're using, you may need only 4 waves, or you may need as many as 8 waves. I'm just going to keep going. Alright, so once you have 2 waves, this is going to be the general appearance of it. So you can see a pattern is trying to appear with these diagonal lines. And like I said, you just keep continuing it until you are all done. Alright, so now we're getting to the end of the bracelet. It's about 6 inches long, and the average bracelet length for a woman is about 6.5 inches. So once we add the clasp, it'll be perfect. Okay, so this bracelet has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 waves, as you can see. So now there's a couple things you can do with the clasp. You can add on a pre-made clasp that's metal, such as this kind of toggle clasp here. Or you can add a lobster clasp or something like that. But since this is a beaded bracelet, I figured we could go ahead and make a beaded clasp to match. So now what we're going to do is make a beaded toggle that's going to be sewn directly onto the bracelet. So in order to do this, so you have your size 15 beads here at the end. So now what we're going to do is continue that into a loop. This is going to be the loop of the toggle. So you're going to take, you always want to take an even number of beads whenever you're doing a peyote stitch. I'm gonna take about 20, and you kind of just have to eyeball this to figure out what length you want. The biggest thing is that you'll need the little bar to be able to go through it. Alright, so this is 20 beads here. And if we loop it around to the other side, that's still a little small, so I'm going to add another 10 on. There we go, that's a good size loop. Alright, so what we're going to do, so we emerged from one side of the peyote stitch beads. Now we're just going to go right back through the other side so that we have this loop. And then I'm just going to weave through that last row of beads again to get back to the other side. Alright, so now that's pretty firmly in place. So now what I'm going to do to make this loop, because we want more than just a single loop of beads, we want it to be stronger than that. So I'm basically going to peyote stitch just around the outside of this loop, just like we did to make the bracelet itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another size 15 bead. I'm going to skip the first bead in the loop and go through the second bead in the loop. And then I'm going to pick up another bead. Again, skip the first bead in the loop, go through the second bead. We're just going to keep doing this all around the loop. Alright, so now I've gone all the way around. So now you can see there's it's a uneven pattern of 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 all the way around the loop. So now we're going to add on to our peyote stitch just like we did before. So instead of going back through the bracelet, we're just going to actually turn around. And actually, one thing you can do to make this a little stronger is go through the first bead of that last row. And then come out through the second bead of the first bead of the previous row. And that'll just anchor it a bit better. Alright, so now we're going to add on what was our next bead in the row, which was the silver delicate beads. So again, we're going to skip one and go through the one that's poking out. And we're going to do this all the way around the loop. And then for the last bead, you're just going to bring it through, not the first bead in the bracelet rose, but the second bead. You have to be careful because sometimes these delicas are really tiny and the hole is hard to get through, so I'm actually going to switch to a thinner beading needle to make this last stitch, because we don't want to break the glass beads, because that is very easy to, there we go. Alright, now we have beads that go all the way around, and now I'm just going to weave this through the bracelet a few times. Just weaving back and forth. So now this is nice and secure, you can tug on it, you can see it's not moving. Alright, and so then to cut this thread, so you can use just normal thread snips, but when it comes to cutting thread that is actually on a project, I like to use this thread zapper. This is the best investment I ever made for my beading stuff. It cost about $12 on Beadaholic. And basically there you put in a battery and it heats up this wire filament on the end to really, really hot temperatures, so don't touch it with your fingers once it's on. So what you do is you just find the base of the thread, hold down this button, and hold the filament up to the thread, and it will heat up and cut your thread. And you can set that aside, and now your piece is nice and smooth with no thread sticking out. Alright, so we're going to actually set this aside for now, because now we have to make the bar that will go through the toggle. So I'm just gonna put this up here for now. And now we're going to make the last component of this bracelet, which is the bar of the toggle. Alright, so now for this we're still going to use a peyote stitch, but we're not going to be building and shrinking with different sizes of beads. We're going to use the same size of bead every time. And I'm going to use these nice delicas here because delicas are very flat, they line up very nicely, and for the bar that is what we want. We want it to be very crisp and smooth. I'm actually going to get a couple more of these. These little boxes are great, I got them at Michael's. So I'm going to get about 18 inches of thread, maybe 2 feet. Not really trying to conserve thread here. A little more is always better than not enough. Alright, so I am going to tie on a stop bead to this just for the moment, since we're going to be adding a few more beads. It's going to take a little longer to loop back with the peyote stitch, so I'm just going to do a simple knot to tie on the stop bead. There we go, and it doesn't need to be that far from the end. Actually, I'm just going to pull it so that you just want enough thread that you can weave it back through. So I'm going to do like 4 inches from the end. Alright, so once again, important thing with peyote stitch is that you always have an even number of beads. You actually can do odd count peyote stitch, but it's definitely more difficult, and we are not using that for this project. We're only using even count peyote stitch. So I'm going to bring these beads to the front since these are the only ones I'm going to use right now. Alright, so what we want is a bar that just barely is larger than this loop so that it all stays in place. So I'm going to pick up an even number and just kind of eyeball when it's the right length. So that's 10. That looks like it might be a good length. I think I'm going to go ahead and go with 12 though, just to be safe. Yeah, that looks like a great length. Alright, so I have 12 delicas on here. Slide them all down to your stop bead. And now you're going to turn around, and just like with our other peyote stitch, you're going to pick one up, skip one, go through the second to last bead. All right, now we've gotten to the end, and just like before with our bracelet, we're just going to turn around and keep going, except this time we're not going to do different sizes. We're just going to keep doing that same size delica, because we don't want it to have this wavy effect. We want it to be nice and straight. We're basically going to make a rectangle from a peyote stitch. So once you have 6 columns of peyote stitch, you have a nice rectangle here. Instead of adding another row, we're now going to weave the 2 ends together. So you're going to fold it up like this, and then instead of adding a new bead here and weaving through here, we're going to actually take this bead sticking out on the other end as our new bead and then weave it back through the end that we started at. And this is going to create a little tube here. So we're just gonna go pick up one from one side and then one from the other side. And we're just gonna zip it up like a zipper all the way down. Weave down through a couple beads to make sure that it's nice and tight. All right. Cool, so now we have this little tube of beads. All right, and that's gonna be the bar for our toggle clasp. Okay, so now returning to the bracelet. So now we need to finish up this end of the bracelet so we can weave on the bar. So I'm going to remove my needle from the bar. I'm gonna reattach my needle to this side of the thread. So now we need to make sure on this side that we have 3 rows of size 15 beads just like the other side. So I'm going to add those on real quick. Alright, so now what we want to do is create the attachment that will allow this to be attached to this. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 size 11 round black beads. I'm going to pull those down. Then, actually we should snip these threads. I'm going to take my thread zapper. I'm going to just zap this thread off. I'm going to zap this ending thread off as well. Alright, so now we're going to find the middle. So there's an even number of beads. So you're going to want to find like the middle 2 beads. So in that case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we want 6 and 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So these 2 beads in the middle. So we're just going to thread our needle through those 2 middle beads. So now what you should have is 5 beads leading up to the bar, and you're going through 2 beads of the bar, and now what we're going to do is add 2 more of the round black beads, and then you're going to go through the middle bead here. You're just going to thread that through. Then you're going to add 2 more beads, and you're going to go back through this bead that was added here on the end of the bracelet. So now what you should have is basically an X pattern that leads to the bar. And this one, it makes it look a little nicer, it makes it a little stronger, and it's going to give some room for the bar to go through the loop here. So now we're just going to reinforce it. I'm going to just weave back through previous beads. And if you want, you can make this part fancier by making this middle bead of the cross a crystal or a different color instead of just a black bead. But for simplicity's sake, we're just using a black bead here. Alright, there we have it. And then we're just gonna zap this thread here. All right, and now you have a bracelet with a bar and a loop, and if you take them, you can just put that bar through the loop like so, and now it'll stay together. There you go. And you have now a complete bracelet. And you're all set. And if you want to see what it looks like on my wrist, I'll just put this on. Put through the bar, perfect fit. And there you go. And that's your bracelet, and you're all set.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit like and subscribe. You can also check out my blog, troublemetals.blog. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and of course I have an Etsy store if you want to check out some of the pieces that I have available for sale. If you have any ideas for videos that you'd like me to see me do in the future, please let me know in the comments. And if you have other feedback, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.